There are no stories about the inside of the tomb. There are no stories about what went on in the bowels of that grave. There are stories about what went on outside the tomb, among the believers who were left wondering what to do, most of whom skulked off to do little, maybe celebrate the Sabbath, maybe lick their wounds. There are stories that aren't in the Bible that Jesus descended to the place of the dead to claim the righteous for his own, ripping Adam and Eve from the place of death before anyone else, then claiming the patriarchs and other righteous people from before the time of Christ for his very own. There are stories from outside the tomb, but there are no stories of inside the tomb. There are no stories about the smell of decay or the smell of dirt. There are no stories about bugs and critters scurrying about or what they saw. There are no stories of waiting there in the darkness for so long for what would happen next. There are no stories from within the grave because we don't like grave stories. We're often afraid to tell grave stories. We're afraid what will come if we ever speak our own grave stories aloud. In February of 2005, a man named Frank Warren began a project called Post Secret. He says the project idea came to him in a quite vivid dream, one that he was compelled to try and recreate when he was awake the following day. He was taking postcards previously purchased and cutting them up, trying to make the images he saw in his dream. Whether or not that makes him amazing or crazy is a debate for another day. Either way, the project that began very slowly has picked up considerable energy. The premise of the project is simple. Send Frank a postcard at his home. The postcard has a secret written on it that you can't share anywhere else. Ideally, you make the postcard yourself, contributing to the community art project that is Post Secret. Each week, a portion of the postcards submitted are posted on the Post Secret website. Over time, the number of secrets submitted each week has grown and eventually received national attention. The secrets have been published on both the website and in 6 different books. Some of the secrets are funny, or at least not very weighty. Someone who hasn't purchased toilet paper in over 2 years because they steal it from their gym. A spouse who packs a lunch for both members of the family but only washes one of the apples. Someone who has never played a round of golf without cheating. Things that are, in the scheme of things, of little consequence. But many of the secrets are the ones never uttered to anyone else. Many of the postcards mailed in are confessions. Images of bruises with the confession, "I still love the person who hurt me. It took me forever to finally leave." Drug abuse is one of the often told stories told in just a few words on some postcard. Lying. Using a child in order to pass a drug test. A sibling confessing to another sibling he's no longer in the will, in hopes that the meth was worth it. Now grown kids wondering why on earth their parents destroyed their family for drugs. There are stories of the grave over and over and over again, stories of the place where there seems to be no way out. Among the secret, there are confessions. Confessions of eating disorders, that an entire dormitory knows that someone is struggling with an eating disorder, but they don't know what to say about it. Confession that a birthday wish was for someone to start eating again. Anonymous postcards are the perfect place for many to confess devastating loneliness, from isolation to a confession of marrying the wrong person. And you can't visit the Post Secret website without stumbling upon a link to a list of suicide prevention hotlines, because many of those secrets are also about deep struggles with mental illness. They're secrets spoken from dark, life-claiming places, graves taking over in the very midst of life. They're stories from the grave that we're often afraid to tell, so afraid that we would rather write them on a postcard and mail them to a stranger than speak them out loud. They're grave stories that frighten us, even though they shouldn't. Because without stories of the grave, there is no gospel. Without death, there is not resurrection. The truth we remember every Easter is that there is no grave so deep, no grave so engulfed in shadows, no grave so firmly sealed that God cannot conquer it. It's maybe the most unbelievable claim ever made, which explains all that hubbub on the first Easter morning. The unbelievable was the reason Mary Magdalene ran to find the others as soon as she saw the stone had been removed. The unbelievable is the reason Simon Peter and the other disciples ran back with her. The unbelievable is the reason Peter ducked and went in the tomb, thinking perhaps it was bigger on the inside. Maybe they had missed something. The unbelievable is the reason they talked about the grave clothes, lying there, some carefully folded, as no grave robber would do. The unbelievable, the impossible, was the reason that the angels showed up after the other disciples had gone. And a visitation by angels becomes more believable and less questioned than all the other things happening. The impossible is why, when the risen Lord comes to Mary, she assumes he is the gardener and nothing else. For how can you explain what is impossible? How can you look and think, yes, this is true? When you know exactly what something is and how it's going to work, there's no reason to expect surprise. But when all your expectations, when everything you know to be true is shattered, you have no other choice than to believe. You have to believe the grave was not so deep, so shadowed, sealed so tightly that it could conquer God. There is no grave so deep, so full of shadows, sealed so tightly that God will not reach down into that grave just to pull you out. For Christ is risen, and we shall also rise indeed. Amen.